Week 36. This is the weekly update for my rebooted weight loss journey of going from morbidly obese to obese and hopefully just to overweight. I hope you enjoy, and I'll see you soon. My name is Mark and I'm here to help you live a better, healthier life. My goal is to help as many people as I can get into shape and improve their quality of life. Now, if this is your first time here and you want to learn more about practical and effective ways to improve your health, your fitness and your overall wellness, or if you're just interested in learning more about fitness and nutrition, start now by hitting the subscription button and the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. And now, without further ado, let's jump right in. So let's start off with accountability. Over the last month, over the last 4 weeks, I've been meeting with a new personal trainer who've got their own private gym that's about 1.5 miles, 2 miles away from the house. And it's been busy at work, it's been a bit of a struggle, but it has been really enjoyable actually getting back to the gym and actually doing some exercise with a trainer who's there to give you that little bit of extra accountability, push you into doing a few more sets, a few more reps of exercises that you may have given up on before. And although it's been a very sweaty mess, 2 times a week, it has been actually really enjoyable going back to the gym. But what impact has that had on my fitness and my overall wellness over the last month? So I guess I'm going to break it down into the sort of mental, the physical, and then the weight. So in terms of mental, I feel good. I actually feel that I'm getting quite a lot out of going to the gym. There is something achingly satisfying about pressing weights. And I say achingly because I feel like jelly when I leave. I ache a little bit the next day, and then you've got to start over again. But it is, very nice, feeling in terms of that mental, endorphins or whatever it is that you get when you actually feel good mentally about where you are, what you're doing, the activity levels. It's extra exercise, it's extra movement, it's extra calories that are being burnt, and that is probably doing my mental health the world of good. It's also, from my point of view, really nice going to a private gym that's close to home, because it does mean I can have a late lunch twice a week and just escape to the gym and then come back and carry on with work, and then just worry about having a shower at the end of the day rather than trying to fit that in as well. It is one of those things that mentally I feel good about it. I enjoy going to the gym. It's really been very nice. So mentally, it's a big tick. I feel good doing it, and I'm glad I found this particular trainer that's got their gym that is so close to home, because I was originally looking for a trainer that would come and do sessions in the garden at home with me or me and my wife. But finding this one, great. From a physical point of view, it is now the day after my last session, so I record these videos at the weekend, and it is one of those things where I am feeling quite achy today, but again, most times it's just a little bit of an ache, and it kind of passes over time. The bit I'm struggling with physically is the eating bit. I still am struggling with that. I got told off by the trainer for eating too little, so I've had to increase the calories I'm doing. I still haven't got it right. I still haven't got it to the point where I'm hitting the right numbers and coping with that. So that's been a bit of a struggle, both physically eating it and mentally. It's weird, kind of going back to eating more. I know it's healthier food, and all the rest of it, but it is a bit of a mental struggle to go back to that volume of eating. Because I know I was eating volume before, but it was volume of veg, which for some reason felt different, whereas I'm eating a lot more actual chicken and things now, protein now, and I need to make some changes to some of the recipes. The trainer has given me a whole pile of recipes. It's just a case of getting to ones that work with my taste and the day and the week and all the rest of it. So we're still working on that, but it is getting there physically. Also in terms of physically, I had my measuring session with the trainer in the last week, and I've lost nearly 2 inches around my kind of belly button, waist area, and almost an inch just a little bit higher than that. So that is absolutely fantastic. I feel physically good, I'm enjoying it, so mentally I feel good. And then in terms of size, 2 inches around the waist, an inch just above the waist lost. Those are things that I feel very good about. I actually really enjoy that. So certainly from that point of view, mental and physical, good. Now in terms of the weight, the weight I've actually put on a couple of kilograms. Now, I think that may well be to do with the fact that I had my payday Chinese last night, so that probably has added to that, and also just the volume of eating and the fact I'm maybe putting on a little bit more muscle, but I have put on a little bit of weight. But I feel good. I feel very good about the couple of inches. So I'm going to start reporting the weight again each week going forward. But I am going to stick with this new regime, and as I've said many times before, don't just chop and change after a week. Actually give it a proper trial. So I'm going to do this for another month and see where we get, and obviously I will keep you informed of what we're doing and how we're going. But certainly in terms of accountability, in terms of what I've been doing this week, it's more of the same in terms of more protein, about 900 to 1,000 calories of protein out of my 2,100 calories goal is from protein, so almost 50%. In terms of those activities, 2 sessions with a personal trainer in the gym, walking the dogs, some yoga thrown in, and some other activities along the way. So certainly put on a bit of weight, but I've lost 2 inches around the waist and an inch just above the waist. So actually, I'm really quite happy at the minute. I'm trying not to be too laser focused on just the number on the scale. I feel good. I've lost some size, so I'm going to take that as a win this week. As always, if you're enjoying these videos, please do leave me a comment and please do smash that like button. It really is appreciated and helps get the videos out there to more people that I can hopefully help. But moving on, let's talk about the week ahead. So the week ahead is going to be, again, still trying to get that 900 to 1,000 calories of my 2,100 calories out of protein and make it enjoyable rather than just munching on dried chicken and all the rest of it. It's going to be about the gym 2 times this week, and also with a personal trainer, and then also with the dogs up the hill, let them have a bit of run. I've been doing sort of 3 to 4 kilometers over this past week or so. The weather's been quite warm, it's not been particularly nice, but I need to step that up even in the warm weather. So that probably is going to mean leaving a little bit earlier in the morning just to get that little bit of cooler weather. I'm going to try and start walking at 5:30 rather than 6:37, and get that in a little bit earlier, a little bit cooler, step up the kilometers a little bit as well, and try and get that up to about 6 a day is what I would like, even in this warm weather. And then throw in on top of that a bit of yoga and some body weight exercises at home as well. So that's the goal. That's the kind of week ahead. As always, doing that weekly shop, trying to plan the meals for the week. Not necessarily what meal I'm going to have on what day, but what meals we're going to have during the week. And if it doesn't arrive in the shopping, then we do without it for that week. So that's the kind of plan for the week ahead. It's going to be a little bit focused. I need to get properly on with the meal with that 2,100 calories, 900 to 1,000 calories coming from protein. I need to get to that point because I want to get there and try it for 2 or 3 weeks and see what impact that has on my weight and what we're doing. As the trainer said, your body gets used to what you're throwing into it, so it is good to change it every now and again. And I am up for giving it a proper test rather than just playing at it for a little bit. So that is where we are. I'm also going to be throwing in an extra video next week, hopefully, with some of the changes that we've had in the home office and some of the changes we're going to be doing this week. Just because I keep saying I'm a nerd and that I'm into water-cooled computers and things, but I'm very aware you've not seen any of that. So we're going to do a little bit of a before and after studio office tour over the next thing. So we recorded some of the befores later on today in terms of what you can't see around my desk. You know, we have made some changes to my wife's desk over there, which I'll do a little sort of video and some pictures on as well. So I'll be sharing those over the next couple of weeks, and I hope you enjoy, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.